still the radio station you love. 2BS 95.1 FM.
You are with 2BS 95.1 FM. Dominic Ingersoll, Christopher Morgan here with you this afternoon. We're talking about History Week this week. And I guess for you, Chris, you have really put yourself literally in the centre of history here in Bathurst, growing up in Abercrombie House. That beautiful piece of architecture, and so much history has happened there in the lifetime of the building. And you've been part of the Historical Society. You live and breathe history, don't you?
Oh, Dominic, thank you. I get up in the morning and my feet hit the ground, and it's heritage ground that they hit. So I love it all. Look, this afternoon we're celebrating all things history, and we could not do this without referencing the Royal Australian Historical Society, which sits really at the peak of so much of these kinds of discussions. And we're joined by its president, Dr. Ian Stewart. Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for your time.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't live in history, but I work in history. I work for a historical company called Artefact Heritage, who's just opened an office in Bathurst. So apart from that, my spare time is taken up as president of the Royal Australian Historical Society. So I have a very active history life.
Oh, Ian, fantastic. Look, before we get into it at all, let's talk about Artefact and Bathurst, because we've been noticing the publicity around the emergence of that business here. Can you just tell us about that?
Well, look, Artefact cast around for where we could open another office, and Bathurst is a natural place because it has so much Aboriginal history and heritage, but also it has just as rich European history, and of course where it intersects, which is where one of our researchers, Dr. Stephen Gapps, has worked, is of course the intersection between Aboriginal and European contact. So we see it as a really important thing, and our experience with the Bathurst community has just been overwhelming. People are just so interested in what we're doing, and we're hoping to have the opportunity as we go along to feed back more information into the community. So it's a really positive thing that our company sees, we're just delighted to be there.
Do you see as important as having your presence in regional and remote areas where there is a lot of unique history outside of what we'd see in metro areas? Oh,
absolutely. I think so many people focus on the convicts and the city. I've always worked in the country, so I've done work at Broken Hill. I've done work at Sunny Corner near Bathurst. I've done work at a place called Burriga. So there's a whole lot of interesting history and relevant history. And one of the things I have a personal interest in is the wheat industry. So I've looked at wheat silos and done various bits of research into the wheat industry, which is almost a forgotten part of Bathurst and the region's history.
Yeah, well, Ian, because is it not true that Governor Macquarie instructed some people to plant an acre of wheat down there right at the beginning of colonial settlement on the Bathurst Plains to make sure that it would grow there?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really interesting question because, of course, they weren't really sure. They didn't know the environment. The Europeans were learning about the environment and how it could be put to what they saw as productive use. Obviously, the Aboriginal people had been there for a very long time and had put the environment into an extremely productive use for their own purposes. They didn't just sit around, spearing kangaroos. They actually grew plant foods and harvested the seeds and ground them into form. I've forgotten the word now, but for cakes to eat and things like that. So there was an Aboriginal productive economy as well as the European economy, which was coming in.
So, Ian, do you see these two narratives coming together now? Because it's part of that whole notion of us understanding what happened at the time of the colonial settlement and the conflict period.
Oh, absolutely. And Bathurst has just had the Deloitte Festival, and I believe there's still an exhibition on about that. But also importantly, the Legislative Council is hosting an event for History Week, and the Legislative Council is the oldest democratic organisation of government, and they started around this time, and their celebrations are sort of tinged with this question at the same time as they're initiating democracy in New South Wales. The the government is bringing in martial law in the Bathurst region. And so they're having a panel discussion. I believe it's the 12th of September. You'd have to check the History Week program, but I believe it might be possible to stream it as well. And I think it'd be very interesting to see what the politicians in the Legislative Council are saying about their history and how it intersects Aboriginal history.
On that, do you think it's important during History Week that we also take the time to look back at history and also go, well, what are the lessons or what are the stories that maybe haven't been discussed as they should? What was in the history books 50 years ago that might have been written at a different perspective that what we would agree with now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was looking at history books 50 years ago, and I mean, the Australian history ones were really boring. You know, there was Captain Cook, and then there were the explorers, and then there was the sheep, and then there was the gold rush. And it was all presented really boringly. You know, it was much more interesting to think about, you know, the thin red line and British battles. But in fact, when you look at it into detail, and that's what I've been doing for my time as an archaeologist and a historian, you start to find really interesting things happening, really important things that sometimes influence things on the world scale that you don't really recognise. So it's really important to do that. And History Week is an important way for people to, historical communities in the broader sense, to present information about their particular areas and the things that interest them, rather than sort of wait till some academic in a university talks about it.
Yes, indeed. Ian, you have in the Royal Australian Historical Society, you've got a tremendous research library, don't you? And I wonder, can the public access it?
Look, at the moment, yes, you can. If you come into History House, into the city, you need to ring up and have a chat to Donna, our librarian. But one of the things that we've been doing at the moment is we actually have a new library cataloguing system which we're implementing, and that should allow the catalogue at least to be accessed remotely so that you'd be able to see, okay, am I interested in a book on Cowra, or am I interested in a book on Bathurst, or am I interested in a book somewhere else? Is it in our library, rather than just sort of, you know, rocking up? But it's a great library. It's a good library. I think we're really proud of it. It has books, it has photographs and things like that. The cataloguing system's been a bit manual, and so we're spending a lot of time straightening out the data. You know, we had topics that we might have had spelled 14 different ways, and it's just because it was all done by volunteers. And we've had a lot of volunteers from Charles Sturt University who've been doing their librarianship course. A couple of them have come in every couple of months and helped us along the way. But as I said, we've got this cataloguing system, should be online in the next 6 months or so. It takes time to do these things because you've got to have the data right.
Yeah, I'm just looking on your website and you list about 60,000 different items in the part of Australian history. So yeah, it would take a little bit of time to go through all of them and make sure it's right.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the stuff we've got is really, really priceless. We have actually put some of the stuff online through the State Library, which are the Foster photos. And Mrs. Foster took photos around 1901 around Sydney, really big format photos. And she photographed the Devonshire Street Cemetery before it was removed for Central Station. So that's where I've come into her photos, and they're a joy to behold. And she's done other photos right around Sydney, so there's quite an archival photographic collection, as well as just the normal books and information we have from local historical societies.
It's all very fascinating. Ian, we could talk to you for hours, but unfortunately we are out of time for this afternoon. All the best, and thank you very much for spending some time with us this afternoon on the program.
Look, if you want to spend some more time with us, feel free to contact me. I'm sure that there's plenty of things we can talk about.
Oh, you're not slipping off our radar in the future, I can tell you that. Thank you very much for your time, Ian.
Thanks a lot. See you later.
Thank you. Dr. Ian Stewart there, President of the Royal Australian Historical Society.